Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, is one of those royal figures who almost never makes headlines. For decades, he has been the definition of the old school royal. Show up, do the duty, keep your opinions to yourself, and never become the story. That's why so many people became fascinated by what supposedly happened at the National Service of Remembrance in late 2025. According to this story, the Duke of Kent, who was 90 years old at the time, attended the ceremony looking visibly frail and leaning on support as he moved through the event. Now, if you followed the royal family for any length of time, you know who he is. This is not some distant cousin who occasionally appears in family photographs. This is a man who has spent nearly his entire life serving the monarchy. He has watched generations of royals come and go. He saw the reign of Queen Elizabeth II from beginning to end. He witnessed scandals, divorces, constitutional crises, public controversies, and all the drama that has surrounded the House of Windsor for decades. More importantly, he earned a reputation for staying quiet through all of it. That is what makes this particular story so interesting. The claim is that during the ceremony, the Duke of Kent noticed Queen Camilla nearby and deliberately turned away from her, not absent-mindedly, not because he was distracted. The story presents it as a conscious decision. Then, instead of engaging with Camilla, he reportedly moved toward Katharine, Princess of Wales, took her hand, and spoke privately to her. Now, obviously, whenever stories like this start circulating, people immediately begin trying to fill in the blanks. What was said? Why was it said? Was there a deeper message behind it? And that's where things become less about a single moment and more about decades of royal history. According to the narrative that's been spreading, the Duke of Kent's feelings toward Camilla weren't something that suddenly appeared overnight. The story paints a picture of a man who quietly observed events from the sidelines for years while never publicly commenting on them. A huge part of that revolves around Princess Diana. Remember, the Duke of Kent was a senior royal throughout the entire breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. He was there during the years when rumors became headlines and headlines became public scandals. Unlike the public, he didn't have to rely on newspaper reports. He was inside the institution itself. The story argues that he watched Diana suffer while the monarchy struggled to deal with the situation unfolding around her. Diana's emotional struggles became increasingly public over time, and many people believed she wasn't receiving the support she needed. For a lot of Diana supporters, Camilla became permanently linked to that painful chapter. Whether fair or unfair, that perception never fully disappeared, and according to this version of events, the Duke of Kent never forgot it either. What's interesting is that the story doesn't describe him as someone who openly fought with Camilla or challenged her publicly. Instead, it presents him as the exact opposite. A man who kept every opinion locked away for decades while continuing his duties without complaint. That image fits the reputation many royal watchers have long associated with him. But Diana isn't the only reason this story claims there was tension. The second part involves someone even closer to him, his wife, Katharine, Duchess of Kent. If you know anything about the Duchess of Kent, you know she had a very different royal journey from many others. Over the years, she struggled with serious personal challenges, including depression and periods away from public life. She never really fit the polished royal mold people expected. According to accounts referenced in the story, comments about her struggles eventually found their way back to the Duke of Kent. Allegedly, people within Camilla's social circle mocked Katharine's difficulties and treated her pain as gossip rather than something deserving compassion. Now, whether every detail of those claims is accurate is impossible to verify, but the story suggests those reports deeply affected the Duke. Because from his perspective, this wasn't about palace politics anymore. This was about his wife. And if there's one thing history consistently shows, it's that people will often forgive attacks aimed at themselves far more easily than attacks aimed at someone they love. By the time the story reaches the years after Queen Elizabeth's death, we're told the Duke had already formed his opinion. He wasn't reacting to one incident. He was reacting to decades of observations that had quietly accumulated in the background. Then another issue entered the picture, the jewelry. After Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, attention naturally shifted toward the future of the monarchy. Most people focused on the major constitutional changes, the new king, and the reshuffling of royal responsibilities. But inside royal circles, another topic reportedly generated plenty of discussion: jewelry. Now, royal jewelry might sound like a niche subject, but these pieces are far more than expensive accessories. Many of them carry generations of history. Some have passed through royal families for centuries. Others are connected to specific queens, princesses' marriages, and major moments in British history. And according to this story, that is where tensions between Katharine and Camilla allegedly became impossible to ignore. One example that keeps appearing in royal discussions involves a diamond brooch that had previously been associated with Princess Diana. The story claims Katharine had a particular interest in the piece because of its connection to Diana's legacy. But when decisions were made regarding various jewelry allocations, the brooch ultimately ended up with Camilla. Publicly, Katharine never complained. That's important because one of the reasons Katharine remains so popular is that she rarely discusses private disappointments in public. Whether people agree with her choices or not, she generally keeps those feelings behind closed doors. According to the story, though, people around her noticed she was genuinely upset. Then came another reported dispute involving a tiara request. The claim is that Katharine's team requested access to a historic Queen Mary tiara for an upcoming engagement. The request was reportedly denied because the piece had already been assigned elsewhere. Once again, no public drama followed, no statements, no leaks from Katharine herself, but stories continued circulating about friction between the two households. Then came what many supporters of Katharine consider the most controversial part of the entire narrative. According to various accounts, Camilla allegedly made private comments criticizing Katharine's frequent use of jewelry associated with Diana. The claim is that she viewed Katharine's choices as performative rather than sincere. The phrase that keeps getting repeated in these reports is particularly harsh. Allegedly, Camilla suggested Katharine was using Diana's memory to generate public sympathy. If true, it's easy to understand why that would upset people. Whether someone supports Katharine or not, most observers would probably agree that she has consistently shown respect toward Diana's legacy. She has worn pieces associated with Diana for years, and the public has largely interpreted those choices as tribute rather than self-promotion. According to the story, news of those comments eventually reached Prince William, and that's where relations between the households supposedly became even colder. Now here's where the Duke of Kent becomes central again. The narrative suggests he wasn't just observing these disputes from a distance, he was drawing comparisons. From his perspective, the story argues he had already watched one woman struggle inside the royal institution decades earlier. Now he believed he was watching another woman repeatedly placed in difficult situations while choosing not to fight publicly. Whether that comparison is fair is obviously open to debate, but according to this version of events, it mattered enormously to him. At the same time, another issue was weighing heavily on his mind: the future of his family's historic jewelry collection. This is where Princess Marina enters the story. Princess Marina, the Duke of Kent's mother, brought with her one of the most fascinating jewelry collections connected to the British royal family. These pieces weren't just valuable, they carried links to European royal houses, including connections stretching back to Russian imperial history. Over the decades, portions of that collection were sold. Financial realities forced difficult decisions. Some pieces disappeared into private hands and may never return to public view. What remained became increasingly important to the Duke. After all, he wasn't simply looking at diamonds and pearls, he was looking at family history, and according to this narrative, he became concerned about what would happen after his death, because under ordinary inheritance rules, many of those pieces would pass to his children and their descendants. The problem, from the perspective presented in this story, is that none of those heirs are working royals. That means the jewelry could effectively disappear from public royal life. It might remain perfectly preserved, it might stay within the family, but it would no longer appear at state banquets, coronations, diplomatic receptions, or major royal occasions. The public would stop seeing it. Its connection to the monarchy would gradually fade, and supposedly, the Duke of Kent didn't want that to happen. Instead, the story claims he began looking toward Katharine, not simply because she was popular, not simply because she was William's wife, but because he believed she understood something important about royal history. that jewelry isn't just decoration. It's memory made visible, and that belief would eventually lead directly back to the moment everyone was talking about at the Remembrance ceremony. By the time the National Service of Remembrance arrived in November 2025, the story presents the Duke of Kent as a man who had already made up his mind. This wasn't supposed to be a dramatic public declaration. At least that's how supporters of the story interpret it. They see it as the final stage of a decision that had been developing quietly for years. The ceremony itself carried extra significance because of the Duke's age and health. At 90 years old, every major public appearance naturally raised questions about how many more official events he would attend. People weren't looking at him as just another royal on the balcony. They were looking at a living link to an earlier era of the monarchy. According to the story, when he encountered Camilla, he chose not to acknowledge her. Then he moved toward Katharine and shared a private remark. The line that has since become attached to the story is simple. The jewels were going where they belonged. Now, whether those exact words were ever spoken is impossible to verify. The conversation was private. Only the people standing there truly know what was said, but that quote became the center of the entire narrative because it perfectly connected every thread that had been building up until that point. Diana, Katharine, Duchess of Kent, the jewelry disputes, the future of Princess Marina's collection, all of it suddenly seemed connected. The story then claims Camilla learned about the exchange almost immediately and brought her concerns directly to King Charles. According to the narrative, she argued that the issue wasn't merely personal. From her perspective, a senior royal publicly signaling support for Katharine over the sitting queen could create awkward questions about hierarchy and influence inside the family. Charles reportedly listened, then declined to intervene. Again, there's no public confirmation of private conversations like these. But within the story, that response becomes extremely important because it suggests Charles recognized something many people forget about the Duke of Kent. He isn't simply another royal relative. He's one of the last remaining representatives of a generation that served the crown through an entirely different period of history, a generation that generally kept disagreements private and placed duty above personal publicity. Whether Charles agreed with him or not, the story suggests he wasn't interested in challenging him. And that brings us to the bigger issue underneath all the gossip. The inheritance itself. The Duke's jewelry collection is private property. That's the key point. These pieces aren't crown jewels. They don't automatically transfer through official royal channels. They belong to him. That means he can decide where they go. Theoretically, they could remain entirely within his family. But according to this narrative, he increasingly viewed Katharine as the person most capable of preserving their public significance. Supporters of that idea often point to how Katharine approaches historic jewelry. When she wears a piece associated with Diana, Queen Elizabeth, or Queen Mary, many people feel she's actively connecting the present monarchy with its past. Whether someone loves the royal family or dislikes it completely, it's difficult to deny that Katharine has become exceptionally effective at that particular aspect of royal symbolism.